From Tantra to Truth by Sanjay Gupta. Part 1 Genesis. Chapter 1. There is nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9. I was born in Calcutta, India, the product of an arranged marriage. My mother was only 12 years old when she married my father, 15 when she had my older brother, and 17 when I came along. We lived with our extended family who ran a business supplying food grains. It wasn't a very warm household. My grandparents ordered my mother and father around no end. My mum was forced to take care of 3 other children, as well as her own, and do virtually all the housework. My father was no stranger to regular beatings from overbearingly controlling parents, a legacy he would soon inherit. Added to those tensions was the unusual religious atmosphere, with my grandfather dabbling in Kali worship and my grandmother delving deep into black magic and witchcraft. It was, to say the least, not the most functional household. My mother's relationship with my grandparents was particularly argumentative. When I was around 7, my school choices were being discussed and, again, my mother and grandfather could not agree. My family was kicked out and cut off from the family business. For quite some time, we were essentially nomadic, moving back and forth between the family home and low-budget houses, depending on when my grandfather felt like kicking us out again. When we were in the family home, my grandfather took on the job of my religious instruction. He taught me about Kali, Tantrism, and transcendental meditation. Kali, the Hindu goddess of time and change, was a ferocious slayer of evil. But in her temper, she has a taste for blood and in exchange for a sacrifice, brings wealth to the poor, revenge to the persecuted, and children to the infertile. He had numerous icons of Kali in a special chamber called the puja room or worship room. She had black skin and 4 arms wielding weapons, her body bedecked with severed arms and a garland of human heads. As a youngster, I visited the Kali temple in Kalighat on numerous occasions. But in spite of my grandfather's devotion and explanations, the experience always scared me. One time I witnessed something there that stopped me going forever. My aunt was on a mission to gain Kali's favor. A large family party attended the temple together. As we entered, I saw the terrifying Kali idol with her many arms stretched out. A pungent smell of incense wafted around, overwhelming my senses. Then suddenly, I heard the desperate bleating of goats. When I asked what they were for, I was told they were a sacrifice. I felt my heart racing. I had never witnessed a sacrifice before. My stomach churned and my knees trembled as I thought about what was coming. A priest ushered us all into a small, fenced-in area at the back of the temple, where the sacrifice would take place. Without speaking to anyone, the priest, clad only in a white cloth around his waist, motioned to his assistants to bring 2 goats forward. The animals' hooves skidded on the bricks as they fought against their captor, but they found precious little purchase and were pulled forward. In the meantime, the priest had picked up a large curved blade attached to a long pole. He led us all in a tantric chant as he grasped the goat. Suddenly, he lifted the goat into the air, grotesquely bending the legs back before slamming its body onto the altar, all in one horrific motion. With a second swift move, the blood came down on the goat's neck, and body was tossed to the other side of the square. The second goat quickly met the same fate, and the frantic bleating was silenced. When it was over, the family went to the altar, dipped their fingers into the blood, and touched it to their foreheads. I felt sick. It was one of my earliest exposures to the power of religious leaders, and of how our earthly desires could drive us to destruction. I vowed never to go to the Kali temple again. During this emotionally taxing childhood, I attended a convent-run elementary school where the nuns called themselves Daughters of the Cross. They were incredibly strict and conservative, running the place like a prison. The students were treated like sinners in dire need of redemption, as if there was nothing more to us than our wrongdoings. We were conditioned to follow orders without question and swiftly accept the most severe punishments for the smallest mistakes. No escape, no exceptions. The most common punishment came in the form of a long, slender bamboo cane which was whipped against our backs and palms. The sharp thwack of the cane against skin resonated in the air, instilling terror in all the students. It seemed to me as though the teacher's urge to prove their dominance was restrained only by a prominent pity for the poor souls of the broken students. Pain was handed out more frequently than praise or encouragement. I quickly came to learn that the school had only two rules: firstly, the teacher is always right; secondly, when in doubt, refer to Rule 1. Though the heavy silence that lined the corridors of my school tainted my perception of it, I cannot deny that each day was an opportunity to learn valuable life lessons. I consciously made mental notes and eventually had diaries full of quotes, motivational poems, and ways to find meaning in life and the art of living. At home and school, I was naive and therefore compliant when my devout Hindu mother, my first teacher, taught me that obedience and gratitude were the key to survival. As I journeyed through life, my understanding of this idea evolved, and I eventually learned that common sense was key. But as a young, impressionable boy, I respected and obeyed my parents, elders, and above all, my teachers. According to my mother, teachers have a special place in our lives and should always be followed. She would always use anecdotes and ancient Hindu scriptures to put things into perspective for me. I remember the story about a poet who asks, if God and your teacher are standing in front of you, whom should address and admire first? The correct answer was the teacher, because they made God known to us. This confused me, as I'd always thought that I was not to bow down to anyone but God. But I took everything my mother taught me as absolute and concrete truth. And why shouldn't I? She was my mother and my teacher. And survival was critical. For many of my elementary school years, I was exposed to leaky roofs, mosquitoes, and all sorts of vermin. Even when we were allowed back into the family home, we were confined to a single bedroom that all four of us had to share. The living conditions, coupled with the increasingly controlling personality of my grandfather, took a serious toll on my dad's mental health. He became less and less able to work, even to provide real parental care. My mother was such a strong person in these times, and I looked up to her so much for it. She picked up where my father was slacking and started teaching the Hindi language to contribute financially, and in the hopes of improving our situation. One teaching of Hinduism is that a mother essentially takes the place of the Hindu concept of God in this world. We are to love, honor, and cherish her as long as we live. These morals were rooted so deeply in my psyche that the first poem I ever wrote in class was called Mother. Mother, you are my goddess. in this beautiful world. Your love that cannot be described. Your sacrifice that cannot be revised. You will love me even if I'll be a dacoit or a thief. Oh, Goddess Mother, that I should pray. May God be with you every night and day. And all the happiness you gave me alone, I shall consider them as a loan. And all the loans I shall try to pay. All my life with happiness and joy. It was a reflection of my complete admiration for her. My mother taught me that I was born to be a good person, to make a difference in the world, and to make my family and country proud. She said the most important things for a man to earn were respect, honor, and love. Most importantly, she taught me to respect women. These principles stayed with me into adulthood as I interacted with my peers and friends. With selflessness drilled into my mind and embedded in my heart, I learned very early in life that everyone saw the world through their own eyes. My grandparents showed this every day, insisting that they were the authority to be obeyed and that our survival was not an essential part of their plan. Everything they did was centered around self-preservation. In the end, family life was all about personal survival. End of chapter 1.